Hey, John.
Hey, it's Ink Black Heart Day.
We're back to a book. We're
Let's do
finally
it.
back to a book.
Woo!
So
Yes, I was looking through my notes on, things like this,
I don't know if you've seen one of these, John. So
Ah!
this is a book. I don't know where the batteries go. I got a in my copy special. It's got a little American bookmark in there. Lets me know how far I've got, because it doesn't keep a memory of where I am reading without I put a little bookmark in there. So this is so full disclosure, this is the first physical J.K. Rowling book I ever bought, because I had a very dear friend come to stay with me, and he was going to teach me how to plot a ring cycle within the book, but he doesn't do electronic books at all. So he sent me off packing to buy 2 copies of this book, and that's my first physical copy. I have to say, since then, I've also got a copy of Running Grave. I ordered one new the day of publication, so I'm beginning to learn about the joys of physical books.
The Codex clan, welcome aboard, Nick. And this is a beautiful book, and like Troubled Blood, it has the equivalent of illustrations.
Yeah.
That you really can't appreciate without the physical book. I say that. Does the ebook have the simultaneous chat room stuff?
Yeah, it does. So it depends upon what application you use. There was a lot of criticism for the early Kindle release, that you couldn't zoom in, and the print was too small on those chat logs. It sort of stored it as a picture. I think that's improved now. I was fortunate with my Google Play copy. It was pretty readable from day one. You could sort of pinch and zoom in, but importantly, you could still see what was happening simultaneously. This was also about the same time. The first audiobook I ever listened to was Christmas Pig, and I recommend it thoroughly. It's an all-cast recording. It's really, really very good. It was Patricio from the Rowling Library said, "You need to listen to this, Nick." And the way I live with my long walks, it suits, and my little commute, it suits audiobooks so well. I've been an avid listener ever since. Ink Black Heart on audiobook is wild. No, you cannot follow those chat logs. You have no idea of simultaneous messaging, which is a key plot point in this book. Yeah.
And simultaneous messaging, if I were to teach a class on Ink Black Heart, Nick,
yeah,
I would be talking about Rowling's doing a horizontal representation of 4-level reading, that you have to be able to look at a text simultaneously and see beneath the surface. That she does brilliantly with this 3 things. Now, that kind of artistry is most effectively done with a codex, with the hardcover. I shouldn't say hardcover. You could do it with a soft cover, but seriously, this is the book. Well, Nick, we're doing it again. Why are we here, Nick?
People may be Googling. I want to learn about Ink Black Heart. They Google, they find this video, they have no idea what we're doing. Well, for you guys who have just joined us, we are celebrating J.K. Rowling's birthday. So she's 60 years old at the end of this month, on the 31st of July. And it's an important birthday, particularly in Japanese culture. It's called the Kanreki. So they have the Chinese astrological animals, 12 of them, that cycle through each year, and also the 5 Chinese elements that cycle through each year as well. Well, the combination of the 5 elements, the 12 animals, means they have a calendar that covers 60 years. When you reach your 60th birthday, you've reached the point in the calendar at which you come in, and it is time for your rebirth. You have lived through a whole calendar. Now it's time to start again. Huge deal.
I mean, it's a combination of like a New Year's celebration. You've arrived at the end of the cycle, the sun cycle, or like a birthday. You know, oh, look, I've gone through another cycle. I'm beginning again from my point of origin. But you only get one of these birthdays, Nick.
Yeah,
you only get one 60-year cycle. You know, maybe there's somebody out there who's planning on doing their second Kanreki, but that's a real stretch there. You're definitely going to have a different existence, your second Kanreki. But to me, it's much more like Saturn return in Western astrology.
Yeah.
You know, the Saturn cycle is 29 years, and it's a crisis. When Saturn's death. And so something has to die and reborn again, and you're between your 27th and your 30th year. I think Saturn's actually 29, but and that has importance for troubled blood because of the 29 years. Yeah, 29s are everywhere inside that thing. And I think Robin turns 29 in that book, right?
Yeah.
So that the Kanreki is a big deal. Japanese have their celebrations, and we're hoping that the wood snake, you know, with her snakewood wand, you know, JK, the wand holder. It is interesting that Salazar Slytherin's wood, Nick. You know, that's the anyway. She's reached this thing. She's about to enter the second part of her life, and we want to celebrate her life and work. Why does that bring us to that beautiful pond, lake, marsh behind you? And
I'm calling it a lake. And your garage, which you're calling a shed, John. Well,
I am.
These are our metaphors for J.K. Rowling's metaphor. So she has a metaphor for her creative process, which she calls the lake and the shed. And the lake is where she gets her inspiration handed to her. It is a primordial soup of her subconscious, all her unresolved issues, all the things she's experienced in her life, all of the books she's read, swim about in that soup, and then her ideas, like molten glass, are handed to her. She then takes that idea over to John's garage in Oklahoma, where she works on it. So this is her inspiration. That's her perspiration. Just like in Hogwarts Professor, where John does all the hard work, that's where J.K. Rowling goes to fashion her stories using her artistry.
Really, I think she's basically saying that her unconscious mind, her subconscious, everything in there, the books that she's read, her unresolved psychological issues you talked about, her core beliefs, the experiences in her life, the key relationships. I call them the buoys of the lake. You call them the pillars. That those four things bubble up in her in story form because she's a storyteller. But then that unconscious, subconscious material coming up, she takes over to the shed, and that's where the conscious artist does her intentional work, crafting a story that is not a Mary Sue, hot mess of just projection and wish fulfillment fantasy, but is archetypal, edifying literature about what it means to be human. That you're going to experience this in the crucible of story, and you're going to be a changed person via your imagination or your heart. And this book, Nick, is really about that heart. Tell me. This is a big lake book, as we've said.
Huge lake.
As you can see, there's Christmas Pig, and then there's Ink Black Heart. I would say that. Wow, your Casual Vacancy is number one.
Yeah.
Christmas Pig, I think, is critically important to Rowling studies because it's really almost the perfect marriage of lake and shed, where she's talked about her intentional dropping of things from her own life inside that story. She has a cameo inside that book. But Ink Black Heart is one where she pushes back hard that this was about where she was at right now. But it's so obviously about where she was at right then. So I'd say that as a Lake book, I'm going to give it number 3, Nick. But at 3 out of 21 or 22,
that's pretty good. That's
pretty
good.
high. That's up there, right? You're the Lake guy. I'm going to let you lead on this guy.
This is the pillar I'm going to rely on most, I think, is 7 Ages of Jo, and this is Jo in her age of power. So right now, J.K. Rowling is an online personality, and I think famous for being an online personality. She's on the internet. This wasn't always the case. So if you look back at her early Twitter days, she had a Twitter account going way back, 2015, I think it was first set up, but she never posted anything. She had a pinned post saying, I'm not going to spend much time on here. Pen and paper is my priority, and that was it. And lots of people, I'm sure, thought, yeah, quite right. Well, the last thing we need is another celebrity on here making a fool of themselves. But slowly she came round. She's interacting with people. She was funny. She seems, in the early days, certainly to enjoy her time on Twitter. And the question we need to ask is why? Well, I term this period of her life from sort of, really 2007 on as her period of power. 2007 to 2015, she's at her peak in terms of reputation. She's a colossus. She's a giant. A few people are still writing snooty reviews, but you can't touch her. If you ask random people on the street to poll who were, the people who have most impact on society for good, J.K. Rowling's going to be on there somewhere. There's not a lot of criticism. She is a woman of power. But if you're going to be a writer, you need to talk to real people and experience real life. And I think from 2007 on, that was getting harder for J.K. Rowling. You can't, even while she was still writing the Harry Potter books, through to the early 2000s, she was still going to the supermarket. And she was saying, she would always, when somebody would tap her on the shoulder and say they were a big fan, she'd be shopping for tampons or something like that. It's a real clash of real life versus this celebrity persona. Well, she's got a security detail now. She's just too big. She's too famous. She's too rich. She's separated from real life. And I think interacting with ordinary people on Twitter and joking with them and criticizing some people and getting involved in politics helped to ground her. But, that isn't real life. And I think this Ink Black Heart is J.K. Rowling's explanation of the pitfalls and trouble of this online life that so many of us, myself included, lead. Now, when she was asked in interviews about Ink Black Heart, the Twitter storms she creates and the death threats and the threats of sexual violence and the hate that is thrown at her is massive. So of course people ask, was this based on the post-trans reaction? And J.K. Rowling said no. And you can be skeptical of that. My pitch for, I find it perfectly believable that at least the germ of the idea predates that, is this is not the only example that J.K. Rowling has gone through in terms of online backlash. So just some of them. Johnny Depp. So she had, although, she's a writer, she's not involved in casting. She got a lot of backlash for Johnny Depp after the release of the first film and then all the stories start coming out of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And okay, it wasn't to the scale of the trans pushback, at least initially. The trans pushback, it was relentless, and it was constant. So J.K. Rowling would post a photograph of a pretty flower she saw, and then underneath it there would be, what about Johnny Depp? What about Johnny Depp? You mentioned when we covered Fantastic Beasts 3 a little bit of the pushback she got from the Pottermore stuff on North American magic and the cultural appropriation of Native American culture. And there are some people that I think are pretty reasonable, think that she should have approached that in a better way. I would, and I'm naturally inclined to defend. So the way I would defend that is, the cultures we have within the UK, that would never be an issue. So J.K. Rowling is not Cornish, but the Cornish are thrilled she's noticed them. It would never be a case of you can't write Polwarth, you're not Cornish, you can't write a Cornish nationalist. It would never occur. But there was not as vehement as she got about Johnny Depp, but there was a pushback, and quite a considered pushback, but there was a lot of pushback against it.
I'm going to interrupt here. There are only 3 Rowling readers, Potter pundits, whatever you want to call them, that have made serious contributions in each of the 4 generations of Rowling criticism. And one of them is Amy Sturgis, Dr. Amy Sturgis. Yeah. And she's a Native American from Oklahoma. She lives in North Carolina now. She's not a woke zealot. But as a Native American, she just said, wow, what you are doing here is just so wildly inappropriate and offensive. Yes, you just assuming that this is not the UK where all these people are on one island and all these different things. This is a continent, and you're butchering these traditions and putting them all in New England at the same time. And you're just like, you really have done something here that's rude. And also, what I don't know if Royce couldn't know this at all. Boarding schools to Native Americans are like concentration camps to Jews. The boarding school situation is how what Native Americans here in Oklahoma consider a genocide, the destruction of the entire tradition by taking the children away and sending them to Western schools. And so to have a Native American school thing like that was just so tone deaf.
Yeah.
And Rowling, to her credit, just backed away. She didn't say, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry." She just went cold on silent, just backed away from it. Anyway, just interject that there. That all these scandals, this and that. I was like, she got called out by people that know her work, very sober-minded. Amy Sturgis is a giant in everything from dystopian literature to the Star Wars films. That she covers the complete gamut. She's not a one-note wonder. And few people know Rowling as well as she does. So that was us. And Tolkien, Anyway, she's been known Tolkien scholar. So this was just wild to me, that thing. But point taken, she's been through this before.
Yeah.
She's been taken to the shed, the woodshed, not the shed.
Almost any sort of bigotry you could imagine she has been accused of. So if you look for Cho Chang naming controversy, you'll find a lot of white American teenagers criticizing that choice of a Chinese name. Very few Chinese people I found one Korean person that was criticizing it, claiming they were Korean names. But Yes, she's been accused of anti-Semitism, the Goblin bankers. Yeah, a lot of criticism, even for stuff that's just purely film based. So Seamus Finnegan blowing things up, being Irish, that's just in the films. Goblin bankers having hooked noses. She didn't make the prosthetics. My personal favorite, the Star of David that's on the floor of the Goblin Bank. Well, it's not a Star of David. It's an Australian Commonwealth Star. How do I know that? Because it was filmed in the Australian High Commission, and that floor was put down when they built the building. But yeah, but it's very much
That's
as
why
it's.
they chose the
That's why they
building.
chose the building. Yeah.
That was it. Look at the star.
But very much as we see in the films, in the Ink Black Heart, people are pouring through. If they want to attack J.K. Rowling, they pour through the work and they look for something to attack. This just like Ink Black Heart is patently a funny cartoon. If you want to attack the author, then you look for penises. You look for bad stereotypes of Liverpudlians. So Rowling has.
And this has been true from the very beginning, Nick.
Yes.
I mean, the whole Potter panic about the magic issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rowling was, I want to say crucified, but she was certainly attacked for everything consequent to the magic issue. It was like, oh, your children are disrespectful. Your children don't obey rules. Your students don't do this or that. I mean, it's like, oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Anyway, but it certainly has been taken up a notch. And the funny thing is they even though they're going through the thing, combing this stuff, they miss obvious stuff.
Yeah.
Like the transabled characters.
Yeah.
In Career of Evil. I mean, maybe they go over that because it's too spot on.
Yeah, it's too, yes, yeah. It's too impossible to take a negative take on it. But the other thing she explores, I think, in Ink Black Heart, quite cleverly, that reflects her own experience, is fandom ownership. So when your fandom gets to a certain size, it gets to the point where senior members of the fandom become creators. John and I here, we're creating content for people to enjoy. And the many tens of thousands that will be watching these videos for generations, John and I have to resist the temptation that it's our sparkling personalities and our creativity that's creating this audience. It's not. People are interested in what we're talking about because J.K. Rowling is a huge star and writes incredible books. That's why they're here. So
Nick, for that one fan out there that's here for us.
Yeah. Hi.
We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
We're glad you're here. Don't feel you don't have to leave. It's not,
So I mean, some of those some of the characters she draws are spot on. So Yasmin Weatherhead is a fandom leader that is and forgive me, it's an obvious portrait of Melissa Anelli. I think even if you look at the actress that portrayed her in the TV series, the casting notes and the style of dress and the haircut is just spot on Melissa Anelli. The way she talks in the book, even though of course in real life she has an American accent, but she has that inflection at the end of each sentence. She has the hairstyle that comes down. She's written a book on the fandom, just as Yasmin is writing a book on the fandom. It's really very close. And there's another guy, Wally Cardew. So Wally Cardew in the Ink Black Heart He was a cast member. He's now a YouTube personality. There is a very famous YouTube personality with something like 100 million subscribers on YouTube. That he built his audience playing games, so people watch him playing games. The generation. I don't know. I can't see where the hook is, but anyway, 100 million people think his content is great. He had an online argument with J.K. Rowling that got really quite bitter. Have I named him? He's got 100 million followers. I don't want him to sue me. Okay, I'm going to name him. PewDiePie is his online name. And he was criticized. He was criticized by J.K. Rowling for basically trivializing Nazism. But it was a joke. It was a joke video, just like Wally Cardew. I mean, honestly, the excuses that he came up with is just like Wally Cardew. This is drawn from life. The interactions we see on Twitter, as disgusting as they appear to be in the Ink Black Heart, are real, and you don't have to look too hard to find them. The back channel conversations in the Ink Black Heart are nothing like the Hogwarts Professor back channel conversations. I just want to assure everyone, J.K. Rowling does not have access to those conversations, to my knowledge, and we're usually really quite polite to each other.
Shut up, Nick.
So, I think so. I've invited legal action. I think from Melissa and PewDiePie. I think I'm gonna quit while I'm behind.
Wow. Is that the segue to the shed here? Is that, are we gonna bounce past me over here? Yeah, I just some late notes from the shed is Rowling is not only experienced online and public criticism of her work before the trans wars. She wrote about it in her books.
Yeah.
When she on the open book tour, she said, "You have any messages for your young readers? Don't trust the government or the media." And so the media is always, as a golden thread in the books, is media is dangerous. It's a public narrative that you have to understand is not, it's not real. I hope in the last few talks we've had that the Rowling's focus on the real is a big deal. Whenever you see that word "real," you should stand back. Beatrice Groves, wrote when I talked about just the obvious connections between her real life at the time of this publication. Was it 2022? And she said in a very English way, she said, of course, she was writing about this in 2000 with the Witch Weekly response to Hermione and the conversation between Hermione and that. And she hadn't been canceled online in 2000. I get it. We also know that she's told us, so we know it like we know it's what she wants people to think, that she's plotted these things years and years before the trans wars broke out. We assumed that from 2000 to 2012, she was plotting out the entire series the way she had done the 5 years before she wrote the Harry Potter novels. So Ink Black Heart being what it is, even if you accept the 5/6 flip, and I'm still very much on the fence about that. Really, Louise Freeman's work there is still gold standard to me. These books, there was a book that had a online event in it. So I get it that this stuff preceded it, but the vitriol of it and the exactness of it, she was drawing from real life. And she said that so much in the Barmy Army interview. She just said flat out, if I had used stuff from my Twitter feed in the book, people would have thought that I was exaggerating and making, a horrible misrepresentation of what Twitter is really like. She had to damp it down a little bit. Too true, too true. My difficulty with Ink Black Heart, and it really is the one of the books. Well, it's the only book. It's the only book that Rowling has written that I have not dedicated months of my life and reading it 5, 6, 7, 8 times, charting it. I've never charted this book, never done the ring analysis of this book, other than with a friend of mine in Wales. We started it one night. That said, I picked up my copy of it today. I got 3 copies to include one with your friend. And I turn pages, corners, when I think there's really critical stuff that I know I'm going to come back to. And there aren't more than 3 pages in the book that don't have a turn. It's just that dense a work. Yeah. It's about the heart, and that's in terms of Rowling's core beliefs about the soul and about her artistry being about the soul's perfection and spirit. The heart is it. It's not what the David Heyman crowd is this like, it's a Valentine thing. Oh, he's got a good heart. That's when Rowling says you got a good heart, she's talking about something completely different than you're an extrovert. That's not what that means. It's sort of like the word intellectual. The word intellect is the Latin translation of nous, which is this heart or the eye of the heart. But now people talk about intellectual, that means that you're an academic. It couldn't be further removed from what intellectual meant in all the traditions of English literature that predate the late 19th century. So I mean, this and Rowling's that kind of artist. But Nick, why have I neglected this book so much? Why have I not done the work? And that's a weird thing about Ink Black Heart is that when you look back at Robert Galbraith studies, really getting into what Rowling is after in these things. Have I said this before, Nick, or is this from our conversations in between shootings? That really, if you listed the best online material criticism of a specific work, you're going to find Hogwarts Professor posts on that top 10 list. And I'd like to think, in the top 3, you're going to find at least one that's going to be from Hogwarts Professor.
I don't think that's an exaggeration at all.
Ink Black Heart, yes, there's some important stuff on there, especially about myth, the mythic backdrop stuff I did. I thought was really good. But there's the alchemy, the ring composition, it's like an empty hole. And then there's Aurora Lee, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's got the book has a written template from 19th century women's poetry, and no one's done that work. No one's. No. If you think of Lethal White Rosmare's Home, boy, it's Hogwarts Professor right down the list. It's an important thing. You go to Troubled Blood and Fairy Queen. Really, if you do Troubled Blood, Fairy Queen as a search, and you're not buried in Hogwarts Professor quotes, wow, get a new search engine, because Elizabeth Barrett Hardy, Beatrice Groves, and my own pathetic contributions, I'm not a Spencerian, were the gist of it. We get Aurora Lee, and we don't do this. And this is So this is like my most personal shed thing. I want to do a lake thing on my shed reading of Ink Black Heart, Nick. Just an FYI, this is nobody, would know this unless they're really attentive to things I say as asides in my post. This was one of the most challenging periods of my life in 2022. I was preparing for my Viva exams for my PhD. We were still in the heart, we were beginning the final long taper of the COVID lockdowns and that madness, which for me I was in an essential industry, but I had to wear a mask. I was getting tremendous pressure to get the clot shots. It was a high stress period of my life. And Ink Black Heart, the codex, dropped on the day of my Viva exams. Wow. Talk about distractions, Nick. Because I don't know, Americans don't know so much about Viva exams, but basically it's winner take all. Yeah. You've your thesis and you have to defend it in front of an external reader and an interior reader of the institution where you're working. I had wonderful readers, one a Tolkien scholar, and the other, a professor of literature at Swansea. And they gave my thesis a real read. That was, and it was difficult for me because I didn't get to write the thesis I wanted to write at first. And the wonderful thing was the Tolkien scholar said, who was familiar with my work, said, "John, why haven't you referenced any of your work inside this thesis?" I was told not to, She's like, well, that's in the rewrite. You're going to fix that. This is stupid. You're that guy. Your stuff. Anyway, so it was a good Viva. I passed it, but then I had to do all the rewrites, and I had to write the thesis I wanted to write, and it had to be perfect because it's that one. They don't even talk to you. It's just accept or decline. And so that would have been like 7 or 8 years of work and too much money to risk. So I was all in on my thesis rewrite, and that was when, the Ink Black Heart was coming out, and Troubled Blood came out a year after this. I mean, it was a pretty prompt turn. Was it 2 years or 1 year?
Running Grave was 1 year. 1 year.
Well, yeah. So it was a tight turn.
Yeah.
And so by the time I was coming back into the game, Ink Black Heart was already in the rear view mirror. And Running Grave, there was a lot of work to be done on Running Grave. It wasn't like that was it wasn't like we got a Career of Evil moment. It was kind of like, well, that was kind of weird, but that's an average. That's the thumb on the hand. No, that was powerful stuff. And so Ink Black Heart was my neglected book. And if you want us to study that, if you want Nick and me to talk about Ink Black Heart, and you want to really do the work that we do, that we haven't done yet on a book, of course,
let us know in the comments.
Let us know in the comments. But here's the thing that really blows my mind about Ink Black Heart is I think we've all read a book and or a blog post and been struck because the author seems to be teasing you, maybe even laughing at you personally, because they just get so close to things that are what you're known for or what you're about. It's as if he or she knows you. I know that Beatrice Grove's husband teases her about, the Silkworm being about early modern drama. There she is, early modern drama, And then we get the Spencer book. It's like, whoa, she's writing just for you. I got that feeling when I'd never gotten that feeling before until I read Ink Black Heart. Okay, I'm asked at least once at every public talk I give or long conversation I have with a Rowling reader if I've met her, if she knows I exist, and I have not met her, and I have no reasonable expectation to ever meet her. I mean, she's refused for 20 years all interview requests from Potter pundits and serious strikers. I hope it's not just a John thing. And she has not acknowledged the books I've sent her as a courtesy. And she did send a note to Penguin when Harry Potter's bookshelf came out that her office did, saying that she didn't have time to read it, which is okay, fine. Yeah. but she has made unpleasant comments to the New York Times about writers who have detailed the Christian content of her work. Criticisms, she said, that put her off reading book-length studies of her novels. That could be Connie Neal, or that could be Richard Abanes, but it could be me, right? So I have little to no reason to believe what we do here at Hogwarts Professor, Substack, or the weblog, or what I've written and said here in books or in other venues are subject of Rowling's awareness, you know, even on her screen, and which makes use a little bizarre, given the investment of my time in the Rowling Artistry and Meaning Project, and how much my public identity is twined with this study. But this no contact status has been no small blessing. I doubt very much, given the chasm separating Rowling's and my religious and political beliefs, not to mention the Grand Canyon between our financial status, that we could be friends, you know. And the work that I do in examining her novels largely depends on at least the pretense of objectivity. You know, something, even access to her office for confirmation or denial of biographical details. One motivation I've had recently for wanting to contact her, that contact might damage or disapparate, you know, that kind of objectivity. But living as I do in Gilderoy Glen here in my shed in Oklahoma City, more than once during my reading of Ink Black Heart, the story made me, and fortunately, Nick, for my sanity, others in the moderator channels here as well, it made me think that Rowling was making reference to things I've written or said about her work. So I'm going to indulge myself. We've done like 20 of these things, Nick. I want to talk about, you know, where I was reading Ink Black Heart and thought, oh my gosh, you know, is she, you know, slapping me here? Is she laughing at me here? What's going on with this? The first one was the Coleridge connection, which of course made the Hogwarts Professor faculty all laugh. She released the first chapter epigraph, and it was by Coleridge. It wasn't Samuel Taylor Coleridge, but his distant relation, Mary Elizabeth Coleridge. But still, you know, my claims that Rowling's spiritual thrillers harken back to the Bard of Ottery St. Mary's. That's you know, Ottery St. Catchpole. That's a pointer to Ottery St. Mary's, which is where Coleridge is from. You know, that her influence, his influence through Tolkien, Lewis, and Nabokov have been discussed all over Hogwarts Professor. Just do Coleridge search on the Hogwarts weblog, and you'll get it all. And I devoted a whole chapter in Deathly Hallows lectures just to that subject. But you know, she has Mary Elizabeth Coleridge. Mary Elizabeth Coleridge doesn't have that many epigraphs in Ink Black Heart, but they're the first one. They're near the end, and there's one right in the center, right, dead center. But I laughed that off, that connection. I said, okay, you know, if only she had chosen STC for his epigraphs, so all the work I did in my first thesis drafts on influence might have paid off. But when the book itself arrived, 5 other references popped up. And the first 2 are about the character Zoe Hay, aka Worm28 on the moderator channels. They're the Ink Black Heart moderator channel. Zoe Hay is not on our moderator channels. The best part is that Louise Freeman wrote to me about this right away. You know, and I'm happy to admit the connection hadn't occurred to me until I got Louise's note. Zoe chooses the online name she does, presumably because there's a character in the Ink Black Heart cartoon that is a worm. One the animators discuss in their Chapter 5 interview, the one that sends Anime around the twist when Edie disses their game. Okay, now this is, this is the 2 creatives of the Ink Black Heart talking to an interviewer. Sometimes the fans see things that, well, not that aren't there, but that we never saw or intended. Can you give me an example? Josh, the talking worm. We just thought that was funny because a worm in a graveyard, you know, it's eating decomposing bodies. So we like the idea of it being pissed off about its job and talking about it like it's boring, hard graft, like working in a factory. It's just a jaded worm. But then we had people saying it's phallic or whatever, and a group of parents complaining. Josh, complaining that we're making penis jokes for kids. Edie, and we're definitely not. The worm is not a penis. All laugh. Now, Um, in every discussion of cryptonyms that I have with people, I lead or I have, that when I talk about Rowling's, cryptonyms and of her father's Peter's shadow in her work, a parsing of the name Peter Pettigrew is one of the things that I do. Peter Pettigrew, broken down, is a penis that didn't grow very large. But the laugh line for that, because Peter Pettigrew is a coward, and so he has this name like Paul Satchel means little package, is the nickname that Peter Pettigrew was given by the Marauders, is Wormtail. And I do this little reference here to be like, this is a small penis. Now, Louise Freeman has heard that joke too many times at fan gatherings, pretended not to think that this worm is not a penis line in Ink Black Heart wasn't a hat tip or a put down, but a reference regardless. That it was included within a discussion of hyperactive interpretation or overreading, to me, made it seem like if that was a reference, it was more likely to be a slash rather than a compliment. But Worm 28 turns out to have a very meaningful real name, one very removed from male genitalia jokes. On the comment thread beneath the placeholder post for ghosts, we put up placeholder posts at Hogwarts Professor, the weblog, when a book comes out, so people can just comment about specific subjects. And one of them was about ghosts. And Louise, again, Louise on ghosts is really great. Louise Freeman made the case that Zoe Hay was the character most likely to have been under the supernatural influence of Edie post-mortem. Now, I'll put a link to that down below here. Louise is detailing there the importance of Zoe in the investigation, how she is able to seize Robin and Strike's attention and focus whatever else they are doing when she appears, made me realize the name had special significance. Okay, so I responded to Professor Freeman's note there and said, besides saying this is brilliant work, the name Zoe makes your brief here that much more credible. It derives from the Greek word for life, which is, as opposed to bios, is the life of the soul transcending the human person's mortal physical existence. And C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity really hammers that down, that the biological source, the word for the biological source of life that comes to us through nature, is always tending to run down and decay, so only be kept up by incessant subsidies from nature in the form of air, water, and food, is bios. The spiritual life, which is in God from all eternity, and which made the whole natural universe, is Zoe. Now, Zoe is, is this logos life. Anyway, but bios has to be sure a certain shadowy or symbolic resemblance to Zoe, but only this sort of resemblance there is between a photo and a place, or a statue and a man. Again, this is C.S. Lewis. A man who changed from having bios to having Zoe would have gone through as big a change as a statue which changed from being a carved stone to being a real man. That real thing, that's a Rowling note. And that is precisely what Christianity is about. This world is a great sculptor's shop, a shed. We are the statues, and there is a rumor going around that some of us are someday going to come to life. Now, in Christ, of course, says he is the Zoe. When he describes himself as the way, the truth, and the life, that word there is, is Zoe. The man who loves his life in Greek is psyche or psyche, will lose it, while the man who hates his life, again, psyche or the soul, in this world will have it, will keep it for eternal life. Zoe. Okay. Rowling makes Zoe the character. This is me, not C.S. Lewis. Rowling makes Zoe the character who is the vehicle of spiritual influence via Edie, the unjustly martyred woman creator of the story, points on just whose side God is on in this business. Gus is named from Augustus, and in redolent both of patriarchal power and being the name of the first Roman emperor, and of religious prejudice against women via St. Augustine, who lays all of human evil and sin at Eve's disobedience in Eden, marks him as the murderer, the anti-Zoe. It's as if we have the Peter and John distinction inside the book with Gus and Zoe. Strike and Robin seeking out Zoe, seeming for no reason other than a hunch, may be a sign of their affinity with the Zoe as it is of Edie's influence. Okay, so there's significant Christian content in this book that hasn't been worked up as well, but part of that is Zoe. So here's the thing: the worm, not a penis bit, seems like a hit, maybe a poke in the eye, but including the long-suffering Christ character, a la Crystal Whedon in Casual Vacancy, a young woman here whose love is manipulated into something tawdry by a predator, just as Crystal's is in Casual Vacancy, invites the hermetic between the lines spiritual interpretation, what a lot of people would dismiss as an overreading. So they highlight this penis character and then give that name to Zoe as the worm, which invites the reading, which highlights a real powerful understanding of the Zoe Augustus conflict inside the book. And, okay, so that's the worm. All right. Then there's the pelican. The pelican. This was a okay. There's the repeated appearance of a pelican, first in a William Morris art gallery, then in Highgate Cemetery, both times with explicit reference to the pelican's use as a symbol of Christ. Now, you may say, well, that didn't make me think of you, John. But another story I tell in public talks and what I've written about the great variety of Christian symbols that Rowling deployed in her Hogwarts saga is about a note I received from Stratford Caldecott, the late and great giant of Tolkien scholars and a serious fan of Harry Potter, that he wrote me this note on an email after the publication of Tales of Beedle of the Bard. I wrote about that in my eulogy online for Stratford. I said the funniest and briefest note that Stratford sent me was, quote, "No pelican," after he read Beedle the Bard. I had made an aside that the only animal in the symbol of Christ's menagerie that Rowling had not used in Harry Potter canon was a pelican. Stratford seemed disappointed that she didn't work one into her fairy tale set. Again, this is a joke I have made repeatedly in talks and when I've written about the subject of Rowling's menagerie of Christ tokens. Everything but a pelican. Now, the pelican is a symbol of Christ because, in legend at least, the bird feeds its chicks by sacrificially opening its chest so they can take nourishment from its blood. You'll always see it with its beak down to its chest. It's not an obscure symbolism, but a prevalent one in the arts, if one that is more difficult to weave into a story than, say, a lion or a phoenix or a unicorn. At least we're talking about fantasy fiction. And it pops up in Ink Black Heart. The pelicans first appear, as I said, in that William Morris gallery where Groomer has taken legs. Robin overhears the pedant instructing the young woman infatuated by him about the Christian symbolism of the pelican, which was feeding her chicks with her own blood. Okay, that's important because the Burns-Jones connection with William Morris, the Rossetti-inspired arts and crafts movement in Victorian England, and the heart of spiritual center in Christianity, and the poetry deployed in Strike Six's epigraphs, is a rich subject to explore. I just want to note the author is highlighting the maternal sacrificial love of the pelican as an acknowledged symbol of Christ. And that's one of Rowling's golden threads. That's her touchstone. If that were insufficient reference, the pelican appears again in Highgate Cemetery. Josh tells Robin and Strike from his hospital bed that he was supposed to meet Edie on the night they were attacked, near a grave that Edie always liked. It's got a pelican on it. Robin recalls both these mentions on her intermittent tour of thing. She talks about the mother pelican plucking at her own breast with a nest full of hungry chicks, beaks upturned, ready to be fed with her blood. All right, so Rowling is not only giving us a pelican, but she's really leaning into it. Okay, I'm going to put a link down below to, not only this conversation, but to the that Highgate Cemetery thing and the pelican imagery in there. Why would my eyebrows rise with reference to the pelican? Because the pelican joke I've made for years. It's a shame she couldn't have one in there somewhere in a story with more than 1 million words in its length. More pointedly, there's an argument I made repeatedly in Christmas Pig that Rowling's foundation symbol of the love of Christ is the sacrificial love of a mother for a child. Do you want more on that, Nick? Right? Is that the first or the second Christmas Pig thing? That's the pelican is perhaps the most explicit possible symbol of Christ as sacrificially loving mother. It is either drop dead, no doubt confirmation of my thesis. It's a hat tip reference, though something I only discussed explicitly in the January before this, or it's both. But I'll take all of those possibilities. I think we can read Rowling for Edie here, both being author creators of an Ink Black Heart epic. Okay, this is the heart in the fiction, and Harry Potter represents in her soul triptych, and it's the mirror reflection within such a person. Josh is the living inverse image of every person he meets, an illusion of subject and object that makes the mirror of the Aztecian symbol of symbolism and of love. Okay, but it's that mirrored image is what chiastic structure is. So we get to the chiastic structure turtleback thing with, the heart, and last there's the Julius Evola references. I'm a perennialist, and Julius Evola is the bad boy perennialist. Perennialists, as a rule, hate Julius Evola, but Rowling references Julius Evola as, something that the alt-right crazies are all on board with. So I'm not sure if she's just talking about she's been to alt-right websites, or maybe she's taking a poke at John and his perennialism. All right. So that's all my self-importance, Nick. I just want to mention again that that smarmy army, what is it?
Barmy book army, and God bless them.
Army interview. Certainly the best interaction Rowling has ever had with her fans, her serious reader fans. And in that, this was going to be a live Twitter feed engagement. And I said, I posted before, here's the questions I hope people answer. I couldn't get in, Nick. You were in. I couldn't get in. And I don't think she would have answered any of my questions anyway. But Nick, you got to answer the questions from Louise and from Beatrice and from me. You had like a 375 average, which for American batting average, nobody has had a batting average that high since George Brett in 1980. I mean, it was a wow event. Nick was just like having a conversation with J.K. Rowling. It was a wow experience. But in one of them, Nick just said flat out, is Aurora Lee, which has 14 epigraphs inside the book. Is that the template for this book, the way that Rosmare's Home is for Lethal White and Fairy Queen is to Troubled Blood? And Nick, what did she say?
Yes, yes, yes. 3 yeses you got, John.
Wow. That was amazing. And guess how much wonderful research has been done into that connection since that conversation?
I'm going to guess if you haven't done it, John, it hasn't been done.
It's just really weird, Nick. The alchemy on, outside, Louise Friedman has done some work on that, but the alchemy is really thin. No one's done any chiastic structure readings. No one's broken down that way the parts work. And no one did the Aurora Lee template. So yeah, if you want to sign up for the class, sign up down below. Go ahead and tell us you want the class. Nick and I will figure out how to do an online class with you where we learn all those things. Right when we get Hallmarked Man. So next, Nick, we go on to, what's our next book?
We've got Running Grave next. And that's it, isn't it? Wow,
that's the end. Unless we do 2 Running Graves. You're a big fan of Running Grave, right? You want to do 2 of those?
I am a big fan of Running Grave. I do suffer from recentism, so I'm sure when the Hallmarked Man comes out, that'll be the best thing she's ever written. But if you have ideas about what we can do for the rest of the shows, we have some ideas, but tell us what you'd like to hear us talk about.
Hurry! We have to prepare these shows. All right, so Nick, here we are, right at the cusp of the finish.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the editing on these shows and all the research you've done to make these things meaningful.
It's been an incredible pleasure. I mean, the guys may not realize, but we have one of these video chats every week. We're doing a little bit more than normal, and we're sharing it with you guys. But talking to John is always great fun.
And as you said about you, Nick, this is the high point of my week is Saturday morning catch up with my friend in Wales. So Running Grave. We'll decide to do one or two when we get back.
Yeah.
Any idea what you're going to talk about, Running Grave?
I've got so much to choose from. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to surprise you tomorrow.
Well, I haven't made my mind up either. I'm going to be coy, just like you are, Nick.
Okay.
But I bet there's going to be something about structure in there somewhere.
Yeah. Take care, John. See you tomorrow.